This is Awareness Explorers. Well, welcome, fellow Awareness Explorers. This is BrianTomO'Connor, and I'm here with my co-host,
Jonathan Robinson.
And today we're doing something different because I'm going to be interviewing Jonathan about his new book, The Enlightenment Project. And I'm very excited to talk about it. It just came out in Kindle and paperback, and we're going to find out all about it. But first, how are you doing today, Jonathan?
I'm doing good. This is my third interview about the book so far today. So enjoying it. I just started that today, and it's really fun.
Great. How did the others go?
Really well, surprisingly well. You know, there's so many interesting stories in the book because, you know, I've interviewed now 100 spiritual leaders, and it's fun to revisit that. It's fun to talk about the techniques and the lessons, keeps it alive for me, and hopefully it inspires and is useful to other people.
Well, yes, I hope so too. And I'm pretty sure it is going to be. But first, I just want to ask you about the title, The Enlightenment Project, and two questions about it. Why is it called The Enlightenment Project? And maybe, first of all, what is enlightenment?
Well, first, the book title, you know, there was a book that came out in 2011 called The Happiness Project, in which the author Gretchen Rubin talked about taken a year to focus on positive psychology methods to see what worked and what didn't. And I realized I'd kind of been doing that for the last, 50 years or so, where I, busy trying to find out what in the enlightenment space, non-duality space, whatever you want to call it, works, what doesn't, what are the myths, what's really true. And it was kind of a hobby of meeting 100 spiritual leaders, ranging from Mother Teresa to the Dalai Lama, and just finding out what they are like, what their lives are like. I share a bunch of gossip in the book about, what it's like meeting some of these people. And what I wanted to do is, I've had the good fortune to learn a lot. And I thought I'd put it all in one book, and hopefully it would be really useful to other people, and they wouldn't have to spend 50 years doing the same thing I did. But your second question was, what is enlightenment? I like Adyashanti's definition. He says enlightenment is perceiving without the lens of the ego. That's a very simple definition. Another definition is when you shift your identity from your ego personality to either what you might call your soul or consciousness or awareness. And I think everybody's had moments of that, but it's very different when that starts to be a major shift in your life, or when you are so shifted into an identity as awareness that you don't feel like the old character is there anymore. One of the ways I kind of make the shift really quickly, I have obviously, from this podcast and the interviews, a lot of methods, but one of my favorites is, can I see through the Jonathan character? Can I see through the role I'm playing right now and into that there's an awareness here, there's a spaciousness here, and some characters working through that space.
Well, I love the term, the Jonathan character, and I think that's really useful. But some people have the impression that when you become enlightened, that your ego disappears and the Jonathan character or the Brian character disappears and goes away. And that is actually frightening to some people. Does it really go away, or does it need to?
Well, certainly hasn't for me. That's a bummer. Maybe it does in some people, but that's not necessarily a good thing. The ego or a sense of ego can be very useful in the world. So I think of it like, we live in two channels. There's channel 2, where there's me and there's you. There's inside, there's outside, there's good and bad, right and wrong, blah, blah, blah. And then there's channel 1. in channel 1, everything is connected. It all emanates from a mystery of awareness and consciousness. And it's really nice to have 2 channels in this world, because channel 2 is pretty friggin', screwed up most of the time. And channel 1 is always peaceful and everything's connected. So, once I realized that, and I was a depressed, suicidal teenager, and I realized there was another channel to tune into, the question became, how can I get there as quickly as possible and as often as possible? Not that channel 2 is bad. It's just that, 2 channels and 2 heads are better than 1.
Well, I love that analogy. And as a matter of fact, channel 2 can be probably very useful, especially if you know that at any time you wanted to, you can switch to channel 1.
Yeah.
How has channel 1 helped bring you out of depression and suicidal tendencies?
Well, I can still get depressed. I don't have any suicidal thoughts anymore, but it's very different being depressed when you think that, Jonathan or whoever you are is depressed versus, oh, there's sadness going through an open field of awareness right now. And that's a very different experience. There's not a heaviness or a feeling of hopelessness or a feeling that it's even going to go on for very long. It's just now. And the now in 5 seconds from now might be very different. Whereas when you're kind of like in depression, there's a sense like there's a character that's been depressed, that will be depressed, that's going to be depressed for a long time. And it's really heavy and terrible. And there's no way out of it. So in the real world, the world that we live in of now, plus now, plus now, plus now, plus now, and we never visit the future, and we never have been in the past, life is very simple and much more peaceful, and the possibility of joy and peace is so much easier to establish, even if you're not enlightened, which I don't consider myself. But, it's like everything's moving and changing, and it's nice to have another channel sometimes.
It sounds like a kind of a shift in identity where you're experiencing it from as the Jonathan character, or as the Brian character, or as the larger field of awareness. And it sounds to me what you're saying is when you can make that shift, then the experience of your emotions don't seem so horrible, or don't seem like they even shouldn't be there.
Yeah, and it's like taking off a very heavy backpack.
Right. Quite a relief, I'm sure.
Yeah. To the extent that I can do that, which is, I have my good moments and my bad moments.
Well,
but knowing that it's only just a second or a slight effort away is really hopeful and makes life a lot more pleasant.
Yeah, I'm with you there. One thing I noticed about your book is that you, especially towards the beginning, you talk a lot about your experience with the Finder's Course, and that a lot of your ideas and methods come from there. Could you talk a little bit about your experience of that and how that informs the book?
Yeah, I was with a spiritual teacher for 26 years, and I had explored a few other things. I thought I knew like every method out there, but Dr. Jeffrey Martin in the Finder's Course, said you can learn a bunch of methods. What he did is very similar to what I did. He interviewed a lot of awakened people and said, what is your best method for getting there? And it ends up, I didn't know a lot of these methods, and they are really great. And I describe a bunch of them in the Enlightenment Project book. And you can take his course, which costs, a bunch of money. It's a great course. But I want these methods to be out there to a larger audience for people who don't necessarily have the 2 hours a day to take his course, or the $1,000 or whatever it is to take his course. That these methods should be available to everyone. And there's a certain percentage of people that will try a certain method, and immediately it just makes their head explode, and they can't believe how did I not know this? That's not everybody, but if you try enough things from the Finder's Course or from my book, you usually find something that, wow, that worked surprisingly well. And you know, Brian, that I'm a lazy slob. So, if a method takes more than 10 seconds to do, it's not my favorite method. So I like a lot of these 10-second methods or 1-minute methods that really can tune you into channel one very quickly.
Yeah, and of course, we can't go into all the methods that you talk about in the book, but one of them that you talked about, which is also discussed in the Finder's Course, was one of my favorites, which is, I guess we can call it the Lester Love technique.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I have a funny story about it too.
Oh, good.
Basically, the Lester Love technique is you make a list of everybody you can remember in your life, or everybody that you've had some kind of good connection, boyfriends, girlfriends, family members, friends, your sixth grade teacher, whatever it is. And then you take like a minute for each person and you focus on what you love or appreciate about them. And then you go on to the next person and you get a momentum of this feeling of love. And to spend a minute in love is powerful. To spend an hour in love is friggin' amazing. I once got my brainwaves tested while doing this meditation. And this is a woman who has done brainwaves for, all the monks and yogis in India. And when she did it while I was in this loving meditation, she said, "Oh, my machine must be broken." And I'm in bliss. I go, "Well, what's the problem?" She said, "You couldn't possibly have these brainwaves. These are the brainwaves of the Dalai Lama, And I said, "Well, I'm feeling like a lot of love and bliss right now." And it ends up her machine wasn't broken. It was really that my brainwaves were putting out all this, what's called enlightened brainwaves. When I did any other meditation, she said, "Oh, I guess maybe the machine's not broken because here it looks like you're a mess." When you do that meditation, it doesn't do anything. But when you do this meditation, my God, you should see what's going on with this machine. So, that type of external feedback can be useful and helpful to know what works for you.
Yeah. Oh, and just in case our listeners don't know about it, why is it called the Lester Love technique?
Because it was really invented by a guy named Lester Levinson, who had a heart attack, was given a week left to live at age 45. And so he decided that he'd focus on, everybody that he'd ever loved just before he died. And ends up, as he did this, it healed him. He lived another 40 years, ended up teaching what was called the Sedona method to millions of people. And it's an amazing story. Within within a month of being told that he had a week left to live, he was running 20 miles a day and had so much energy he couldn't sleep. So, we don't always remember that there's an X factor to a lot of spiritual ideas and methods. That there is crazy forces out there that sometimes just say, "Brian O'Connor, you're enlightened now," as you're walking up to the bus, or send you a lot of juice, or, Holy Spirit, or all these different things. There's a lot of mystery out there, a lot of magic. And obviously Lester tuned into that magic. And I share a lot of stories in the Enlightenment Project book about my encounters with gurus who would show me magic and miracles, because I think we have to remember in this day and age that, we have our problems and our finances and all the stuff we get on the news, but we're spinning through outer space at 70,000 miles an hour on this rock in an literally infinite sea of energy, and things are weird and there's magic. And I believe that we're all on a hero's journey of trying to become more enlightened. That's what the most enlightened people say. When I ask them what the purpose of human life is, they say, basically, you're on a multi-lifetime journey to become more awake and more enlightened. And the technology for doing that with these little methods and ideas is definitely improving.
And apart from the little methods and ideas, which, by the way, I agree with you, I love the 5-second methods that just pop you into it right there at any time during the day. But one of the methods that most spiritual teachers and leaders recommend is meditation. And you go into meditation quite a bit on your book, and you talk about, I think, an excellent definition of it by Adyashanti. And you also have a series of phrases of your own that describe it.
Yeah, and maybe we'll do that at the end as a little meditation. And it's a method from the Finder's Course of trying to describe what awareness is. And, it's interesting. I can give this to people who have never meditated. And I'll say, fill in the sentence, awareness is, or love is, and just go back and forth describing it. And soon you end up being in pure awareness, or you end up being in pure love. And what's a better way to spend 5 or 10 minutes than to join with somebody else and catapult each other into higher states of consciousness and love and peace? It doesn't take a long meditation retreat. It doesn't take going to India. It's really pretty accessible now if you know the right ideas and methods.
Yeah, and some people talk about meditation as, there's many different meditations: meditation on your own, meditation with two people together, guided meditations as well. One of my favorite definitions is pretty much sitting and not doing anything to change your experience.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be one of the best, but there are many, many others. What do you think about that method as compared to, or what do you think about comparing all the different ways of, meditating alone, in silence, guided meditations at retreats, etc.?
Well, I think it depends on where you are in how long you've been meditating. If you're new to it, I say find something that works for you, feels good. That way you'll stay with it. On our website, awarenessexplorers.com, we have 100 guided meditations. They're all free, and you can find 1 or 2 or 10 or 20 that work for you. And that's a good way to start. After a while, you then say, well, am I growing through this meditation technique? So I used to do mantra meditation. And then I realized, I have a really good mind, but my heart could really use some more opening. Or my body, I need to be more in my body. And so I started to do more heart and body meditations. So, meditation isn't one thing. There's a big difference between potato chips and broccoli when it comes to food. They both have the definition of food, but sometimes you want something that's easy and feels good right away. And sometimes you want something that is going to serve your body more in the long run, but it's kind of, not that fun when you're eating it or using it.
Well, I guess there's many different types of potato chip meditations and broccoli meditations. And
Exactly.
I happen to be lucky. I like broccoli. I like potato chips too, but I eat more broccoli. But one thing that I notice you talk about, and I know that you focused on this as long as I've known you, is bringing meditation and bringing any kind of spiritual awakening into everyday life. That it's not just about what happens on the cushion or in the meditation room or in your chair. It's really the rubber hits the road in how you live your life, how you interact with people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, luckily I had a teacher that focused on that, and if you can make use of your daily life for learning, for becoming a better human being in specific ways, or for becoming more enlightened, that gives you 23 more hours or 15 more hours or whatever it is than just the time you spend on a meditation cushion. And there's not a lot of information about that. So I have chapters in the Enlightenment Project book that talk about how to make use of relationships, how to make use of jobs, how to make use of dealing with money, and how to make use of living in your body, or having pain in your body. These are all really important subjects because they're not well explored, and we need to embody our higher consciousness. It doesn't do much good if you can be in bliss and then, when you're out of meditation, you're a jerk or you're overwhelmed. So integrating that is really important. And in America, we kind of compartmentalize our spirituality to the meditation cushion or, the couple hours a week of church or something. And I think that we need to take the next step.
Yeah, and something else you mentioned in this last response was the body, and you talk about that in the book, and that's something that seems to be coming more and more into focus among spiritual teachers these days. Is that yes, we do want to drop out of our heads and into our heart, but that a lot of our conditioning is still there in the body, and sometimes we don't want to just ignore the body or wish it wasn't there, or just say I am not the body and then forget about it.
Yeah, and I did the 40 interviews of spiritual leaders back in 1993 for a book, and now we do a lot of spiritual leaders on the podcast, and so many of them have focused much more on the body. Which is, I think, great. There's trauma that's held in the body. There's tension that's held in the body. So there's a lot of ways to work with the body. I give a bunch of methods that have really made a difference in my body. I'm 62, but I'm probably in the best shape I've ever been because I'm more embodying all these different practices, and it feels really good. So the technology of spirituality is always increasing, just like all other technologies. And in the last 30 years, I see there's been much more of a movement of how to work with the body in a way that leads to more awakening, more embodying your consciousness.
Yeah, I think that's very well observed. I've certainly noticed that, and it certainly made a change for me. And there are actually some really great methods that I learned from the Finder's course about body scanning and just looking in your body and just noticing it. Because the thing about your body is that it's now. If you notice the sensations that are appearing, they're not appearing yesterday, they're not appearing tomorrow, they're appearing now. And I think it's one of the best ways to drop into the now.
Yeah. And, a lot of things follow your intention. So if your intention is to be more embodied, then you'll probably do that. But I also talk about the power of intention, because normally in America, at least, and for me, the intention is often efficiency. How can I get something done quicker? Or how can I make more money quicker? And our intention is not usually so much based on how can I be in my body more? Or how can I be more open to learning or more loving? One story I share in the book is I used to lead an inspiring movie group, which had like 30 people in it. And each week I would share a inspiring movie. It might be Schindler's List, or one week I wanted to show the movie Gandhi. But I wasn't going to be there, so I gave what I thought was the movie Gandhi to a friend to show at this movie group. And the movie that was actually in the DVD sleeve was the movie Men in Black 2. Have you ever seen Men in Black 2?
No, I avoided that one. Yeah, although I loved Men in Black 1.
And Men in Black 3 was pretty good, but Men in Black 2 was blasted by critics and audiences as being really bad. And what was funny is after people would watch these movies, I tell them to write a page about what they learned and what inspired them from the movie. So they've had 20 weeks of watching these incredible movies and being very inspired. And then they are presented with Men in Black 2. And what was hysterical was that they all wrote how amazing and inspiring this movie was. One of the worst movies of all time. Will Smith actually said, this movie is so bad, you shouldn't watch it. That's how bad that movie was. And but their intention was to look for what's profound and transformative in a movie, and they found it because that's what their intention was. And when your intention is to be in your body, you'll be in your body. When your intention is to get things done, you'll get things done. When your intention is to awaken, and then you surround yourself with podcasts or like this, or the book or other books, and things slowly move in that direction. And I think, congratulations to people listening to this podcast, because obviously you have realized that there's a limit to channel 2. And that if you ever want to really be happy, it's going to be found by integrating channel 1 and the peace and love inside of us into your life.
That's a great story. And I can't resist one of the other stories that you tell in the book. One of my favorites is the one about Joe and his wife and the messy house. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind.
I don't even know if I've ever told this story before on the podcast. I don't think so. So I had this agent who used to be my agent, and he claimed, and I believed him, had awakened. They lived in a state of total peace and connection with what he called God. And one day he came over to I came over to his house. And when I went into his house, I noticed that it was like, I'm not a neat person, but this was way beyond the pale. This was like, I could not live in this squalor. And then as I go through his kitchen, it was even worse, like dishes piled up a foot high that hadn't been cleaned in months. And his wife, who was in the living room watching Jeopardy, was smoking a cigarette. And it looked like a different type of household than I would have expected. So in his office, he said, I bet you're wondering why my house is such a mess. And I said, well, yeah, you must be psychic. And he laughed. And he said, well, it's an interesting story. A bunch of years ago, I was thinking of leaving my wife and kids, but I decided I would surrender to God to see what I should do. And I completely said, God, I'll do whatever you suggest. And to his amazement, his consciousness shifted. He went into a state of bliss and realized that as long as he surrendered to what is, he would stay in this blissful, peaceful place. So he is living with a wife that has no interest in what he's doing in a dirty place, and he's totally fine with it. And as long as he allows them, his wife and his kids, to be who they are, and the messiness to be there, he's in a state of complete peace. And, we all have struggles with children or bosses or kids. And I always remember the story, like, if you can find peace in his household with all that mess, then you should be able to find peace with the small inconveniences most of us face.
Well, it's an amazing trade-off that most of us are probably not willing to make. Giving up the idea that other people should be anything other than the way they are, and in return, bliss, happiness, joy.
Yeah, that's a pretty good trade-off if if it was that clear to us. And if you've ever had moments, as I'm sure you have, where you just kind of let go of resisting what is. You let go of having to have your judgments about somebody, and you're just like, okay, they'll do what they do, In that moment, you immediately feel more peace. So it's really, there are methods that help, but the attitude of like, I'm just going to allow what is. Here's the instant, I'm going to give people the instant peace technique. Are you ready?
Oh, yeah.
Whatever is happening in your life, root for it to go that way.
Haha. Yeah.
But we do the opposite.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't really do much good.
No, and that sounds so easy, and it's really tough to root for things to go that way. But I found from experience that it really works. And in the story of Joe and his wife, of allowing his wife to be exactly as she is, I also found that the same applies to myself. Allowing myself, the Brian character, to be exactly as he is, brings a great deal of happiness and joy, as opposed to my old idea that I was fundamentally flawed and needed to be fixed somehow.
Yeah. At the very least, it makes you suffer a lot less.
Suffering less is good.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I think that these stories and these ideas that you talk about in the book are all very entertaining and fun, but also very useful. It's kind of like one-stop shopping for all your spiritual needs. I know that does sound very commercial, but I think it's such a good description of the book.
Yeah, that's actually how Jeffrey Martin, who did the foreword to the book, the guy who led the Finder's Course, how he described it.
Oh,
And,
yeah. I thought it was original, but but you're right. I read it.
We're all so busy and distracted nowadays that we need, really practical information. Plus, you want it to be entertaining as well. So that's what I tried to do. And my hope is that by putting kind of the greatest hits of the stories of all the people I've met and the greatest hits of the methods, that people get the book and really be impacted by it.
Mm-hmm. And one of the ways that it covers all bases is actually embodied in a quote that you mentioned from Ken Wilber. I don't remember the exact quote, but it's sort of about waking up, growing up, showing up.
Yeah. We want, waking up is a first step, but then you have to embody it. So it's a sense of growing up, becoming a mature human being in the world, and then showing up, meaning take your gifts into the world and do something with them. The world's in pretty bad shape. And to the extent that you can tap into love and peace, you're a better vehicle for helping yourself, the people you care about, and the world.
Yeah, that's very good. I think that all of those are important, and it's sort of good to remember. I mean, a lot of people say that waking up is really the first step in the embodiment process, how you can bring it into your life and your interaction with others.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why we have the podcast. That's why, the world's not going to get better until people's state of consciousness gets better. It's a fundamental thing. You need, Einstein said you can't solve problems at the level. What, do you know this quote? It's a good quote.
Yeah, problems can't be solved at the level with which they were created, or something. That's the basic idea. It's not the exact quote.
Yeah. And there are times where, I've been lost in a problem. I'm trying to solve it. I'm in that hole. And then, I meditate, or I take a vacation, or I use some technique that gets me into a higher consciousness. And then the answer to the problem is obvious. But a lot of these problems can't be solved with the level of mind that we are often stuck in. So another hope has been that the Enlightenment Project book will help people get to their next level. John Gray, I liked what he said, the author of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. He said, this book will inspire you and support you to take the next step in your journey of enlightenment. It's fun, surprising, informative, and a real page turner. And I really appreciate that, because some spiritual books are a little bit dry, whereas this one is I think pretty fun to read.
It is fun to read. It's pretty juicy, and it's got a lot of good tips. And when you were just talking about something, reminded me of one of my favorite analogies you have, and how people can get so wrapped up in the solving of their problems that they miss the bigger picture. And the analogy was the one of the black dot on the white paper.
Yeah, I love that analogy. I'll actually create it right now. But imagine a small black dot on a white piece of paper, like this. And that black dot represents your biggest problem right now. Mm-hmm. Well, most people have a relationship with that black dot, with their biggest problem. That could be said to be like putting their eyeball right on that black dot and saying, oh my God, there's nothing but darkness as far as I can see. It's just black and looks dark forever. Well, if your eyeball's on that black dot, you don't see that it's on a white screen or on the screen of awareness. And to some extent, we all are trying to become aware of something other than what our mind focuses on all the time, which is usually our problems.
That's right. It really is. And when we focus on that, it's practically always about the past or the future. It's hardly ever about the present.
Yeah, usually there's not that much going on in the present. You know, you're breathing, you're sitting, you might be blabbing some words, but life in a present by present moment is pretty peaceful. And, you know, I have some phrases in the book that help me to establish instant perspective. Like, for example, one that I'm using is, this moment is the most important moment of my life. And in a way, it's always true because you're in this moment. The moments in the past, you know, they're just a memory. The moments in the future haven't happened. So this moment is the most important moment. And when you have the attitude like, wow, this is it, then you become more present. You become more open to the magic that's really always here.
Yeah, well, that's what I like about the book, because there's so many practical little things like that that you can grasp right away. Like you can grasp that concept and use it immediately and apply it many times throughout your day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I knew there'd be an advantage for me being so lazy that God has used my laziness to find the simplest, easiest ways to tap into something better.
Well, I am too. And I used to despair that I didn't have the discipline to follow the really difficult ascetic, is that the right word, paths of you know, giving up stuff and meditating for hours and hours a day. And I used to despair that, well, I'm just simply not that kind of person. Other people seem to be, and they're the ones who get there. But this is not the same paradigm as getting skilled at something in the material world. This is totally different. This is something that can be known immediately, right now, at any time, and only now. And the whole idea that there's something that you can do that's going to build up over time and get you there in the future is actually an obstacle.
Yeah, or it can be an obstacle, you know, and there's also the point of view that sometimes it's, you know, good to focus on disciplines for a number of years so you get better at them. And, you know, it goes back to the two-wing analogy, that one wing is just be more present now using whatever way you know how. And the other way is, it is helpful to have certain ideas or certain disciplines that might move you along in a beneficial way over a period of time. And usually people are very focused on one or the other of those wings. And no matter how strong one wing is, a plane with one wing is going to crash eventually. So it's good to balance those things out. And it took me a while to learn that.
One other thing that you talked about in the book that I really was moved by was you described a partner exercise, and where one person is asking partner A and partner B, and partner A is asking, I believe the question is, who or what are you? Is that correct?
Yeah, it's who or what are you? And then the question is, if that were taken away, who or what would you be? So it's kind of the neti process done in a partnership. And I find that, you know, some of these newer methods, some of these methods have been invented in the last 10 years, that they work surprisingly well for a lot of people. And it's a fun thing to do with a partner. And maybe in 5 minutes, you're both taken out of the gunk of news and problems and plans and relationships and mind stuff. and into the wondrous presence of our true nature. And what a gift to give to people.
Yeah, and I love the way it ended in the description of it in your book, because once you take away every idea of what you are, you're left with infinite space.
Yeah. Or you're left with whatever, however you describe that experience. People describe it in different ways and people tap in different ways. But it's nice to let go of these things we're kind of glommed onto that really aren't our true nature, and they become like a burden to us.
Yeah. Now, we usually end each of our podcasts, or most of them, with a guided meditation. And I had an idea. I was wondering if you'd be willing to do this. You have a section in the book where you list 20 awareness is phrases. And I was wondering, I thought that would make a wonderful guided meditation. Is that something that you think would be cool to
Sure.
do?
I'd be
Great.
happy to. Let me, people can get the first couple chapters of the book for free, plus a guided meditation on what I considered the 5 quickest ways to awaken, a guided meditation at my website, which is the enlightenmentproject.net. So, you put in your email address and you get those downloads for free. And you can also learn about the book. And there's a lot of free resources on that website, the enlightenmentproject.net. And I hope people get the book, which is available on Amazon and Kindle, and is going, I think by the time people hear this, it'll also be available as an audiobook, which you're editing, and I appreciate that.
Yes, and I'm enjoying doing that as well.
Yeah.
And before we do the guided meditation, I probably should ask if there's something that you feel we haven't touched on that you think would be, other than your website and everything, that you'd love to have our listeners to know.
Well, one chapter in the book, which is interesting, is all about the myths of enlightenment. I think a lot of people miss the little enlightenment moments because they have some idea or belief that is actually counter to enlightenment. And once people see that those myths really aren't true, it actually gives them more access to noticing moments, brief moments of awakening in their daily life. So that's, one of 18 chapters, but, I think there's enough in that book really for anyone to say, wow, that was something that was very helpful. So I think we covered a lot of stuff, and, by downloading the first couple chapters, people get a better sense of the book, or they can just get the book. It's, I think, $15 at Amazon, or $5 or $6 on Kindle.
Sounds great. So we should probably jump into the 20 awareness is phrases.
Yeah. So what this is some phrases that can point you to what awareness is. And you can do this with a friend, or you can just listen to this recording and hopefully, like a finger pointing to the moon, you get pointed in the direction of your own true nature, which is awareness. So after each of these statements, I'm going to pause for maybe 5-7 seconds. And your mission is to try to access what it's pointing to. So we'll begin with: awareness is the passive collection of all my senses. Awareness is the effortless receiving of sound, sights, thoughts, and emotions. Awareness is seeing and being without the filter of the ego. Once again, after each one, try to access what the statement is pointing to. Awareness is seeing and being without the filter of the ego. Awareness is the hum of silence underneath your thoughts. Awareness is what witnesses your thinking without any judgment. Awareness notices what happens to you before the judgmental mind interprets things. Awareness only exists in the present moment. You can't grasp it. Awareness is a shift in identity from wave to ocean. Awareness is what's left when you stop identifying with your ego, your thoughts, or what role you're playing. Awareness is something you relax or let go into. Awareness is the screen on which your life is projected. Awareness is the full allowing of exactly what is happening in this moment. Awareness has no preferences. It has no judgment of what's good or bad or right or wrong. Awareness is unconditional love of what is. Awareness is what's left when there is a complete lack of resistance to this moment. Awareness is the vibrating energy that animates all of life. Awareness is stepping out of a sense of being in a moving river of time and into an eternal ocean of stillness. Awareness is like a mirror that reflects whatever is in front of it. And lastly, awareness is like a portal to an ocean of love, bliss, and oneness. And slowly, if your eyes were closed, feel free to open them and try to maintain some awareness of awareness as you go about your day.
Oh, thank you so much. That was lovely. And it occurred to me that in addition to listening to this as a guided meditation, you could take each of those phrases and maybe for 20 days, just meditate on one of them
Yeah.
for 20 minutes, half hour, an hour, because they each one hold the depth of wisdom.
Yeah. And, being able to be deliberate about these things really helps. One of the chapters in the Enlightenment Project book is about motivation, how to maintain motivation towards using techniques and using your goals. I'm proud of that chapter because you don't get that in many books. Like, what are the methods to stay motivated over a long period of time? And I think that's a really important ingredient as well.
Indeed, it is. Yeah. Well, thank you, Jonathan. This has been so much fun talking with you about your book. I really enjoyed it.
As always, Brian, I love it. And I hope people will check out the book and review it and tell other people about it, because I think everybody's really on a hero's journey of going from a life of ego to a life of more living spirit.
And the website again is?
TheEnlightenmentProject.net.
Great. And speaking of websites, our podcast is free and all the guided meditations are free on our website, but it does cost money to put on. So don't forget to, if you'd like to support us, go to patreon.com/awareness explorers and you'll help us out.
Yep. And you'll help yourself out and your loved ones out by always keeping exploring.
Keep exploring.
Thank you for listening to Awareness Explorers. To learn more, you can check out our website at awarenessexplorers.com. Please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app. We'd love it if you would post a review. And please share our link on Facebook and with family and friends, because knowing yourself as awareness is the greatest gift you can give yourself or someone you love.